All right, let us see if the mushrooms that spring up after the rain will make a witch's circle by which we can see the puissant powers of liberalism in their nakedness. So we want to deconstruct liberalism finally. It's never been deconstructed, in my opinion. Not adequately, anyway, because it's still. Why else would it still be standing there? Many attempts have been made. Samuel Moyn gives a thoroughgoing account of liberalism from the point of view of lavishly illustrating the actually existing political movements from the time of Lady de Stael or Madame de Stael, and saying, oh, here and here and here, people involved in the scrum and real political struggle have been using this word liberalism in the following manner. And these are the ones that have been using it. Or you can look and say, here's John Locke, and here's his version of moving over from Aristotle to Descartes, and here's how he handles that problem and still says we can give some account of political existence, but it has to be kind of dialed back to life, liberty, and property, which according to Richard Epstein, because the Americans are embarrassed over slavery, they changed property to pursuit of happiness. Or we could take the road of Immanuel Kant and Aufklärung, or what is the Enlightenment, and follow. And that leads us, I think, also to Schmitt and to the idea of liberalism as the talk shop. And it kind of connects us to Dugin. And then, in that sense, I would say we could say in a certain sense, you could see why Dugin is put down as a fascist so often, because he is on the side of Schmitt and in a certain way against the talk shop. He's for serious and decisive action. So we could look at it in various ways, but let me try to take some facticity and kind of do phenomenology on it, while allowing. So let's let facticity become intelligible as a conception by saying it's in some way could be understood as a modified form of Plato's shadows, under the notion that out of their wryness, suddenly there flashes forth a being that is able to see things in terms of kinds of things, and this is the basic intelligibility. And facticity consists of that we have some subject matter that's a kind of thing that traditionally has been called Anschauen, or intuition, intellectual intuition, in contrast to the good. We're not talking here about a gut feeling or something like that. We're talking about you see a thing and then you intuit that's a tree. Like there's a whole big fuzzy thing there, but then you organize it and say to yourself, that's a tree. This is the basic intelligibility. So there's a being that, out of the flash of a wryness, has now already sort of settled on this notion that it's explained to itself, it's interpreted itself by saying, we're this type of being that's making sense through categorizing things, through saying this is the stars, these are the this is the that, and if you formalize it into a kind of mathematical presentation devoid of any charge of that you were too involved in the situation to step back and make a cool decision, this mathematicos in that sense, one can then say this region where these initial basic concepts are taking hold of our potentiality as beings, and then always sitting there as basic ways in which we interpret or clarify to ourselves what's happening. Then being able to plug into a formal system of logic with the idea of the first law of thought being the law of identity, which Heidegger has always been thinking about. Um, or not literally always, but I mean, this is one of his at least leitmotifs. Um, so I want to say, looking at the Ukraine conflict, when we see um, the immediate claim of the facticity as the version that Ukraine has been one taking for granted that Ukraine is somehow not just some kind of architectonic structure or a legal framing in terms of legal constitution or a description or anthropological constitution. I think this is the constitution in a way the Ukrainians are, or a constitution in the legal sense of saying this is the basic laws of the country, which describe, whether it has separation of powers or which describe other basic features of how it operates, how the presidents are elected and things like that, or whether they have presidents or prime ministers or what. Taken from an attitude that would say Ukraine is not something like the situation in Czechoslovakia, where even though there's just really one people, suddenly for business reasons, for oligarchs wanting to make money, for Robert Kagan wanting to divide so that these regions can't in any serious way challenge the Western Alliance. This country's split up, right? So we get the Czech Republic, right? And then we get also another state, although these are basically the same people, and there wasn't really any reason that they needed to split it apart except for totally artificial reasons. If you would start from the point of view that nothing like that happened at all in Ukraine, that the Ukrainians are pure of heart, that that they see the true Ukrainian stars up above, that everything issues from their Eigenlichkeit being, that far from being a communist apparatchik, their first president was the true father of the new Ukrainian reality or whatever. If you would see it that way and not regard in any way, regard a primordialist Ukraine, so everything is the outside, then the facticity is clear. Then you say the Russians are attacking us, because there's only the inside and the outside. There's only the enemy and oneself. There's no stepping back. There's no scientific attitude. If you would look at it from the scientific attitude, then you start to get closer to liberalism. So let's try to look at that more detailed. So say we have somebody who's totally absolutely refuses even to genuinely consider that America has been constantly stepping closer and closer, and that is already written about by the teacher of Fukuyama back in the Clash of Civilizations book. Is all the whole thing that was going to happen in Ukraine was already said to be on the shatter point of the Eurasian frontier. This is the most important zone, and of course, if NATO were to try to take Ukraine, that would be catastrophic for the Russians, and etc. This is all known for the whole time since the Soviet Union ended, even before that. And now, just like a cutout puzzle, this which was, I guess in a certain way just a traditional hypothesis, has gotten sort of the most full and possible empirical verification. I would just say verification. I don't believe in the Karl Popper's notion. It's just like a band-aid trying to pretend something that doesn't make sense. I think either we have to verify by inferring out of the facticity what the case is, or there's nothing else you can say. We infer something out from what's given to us. We see a man in the yellow shoes running out of the bank with the big suitcase of money. We see the man in the yellow shoes buying a fancy car sometime later. Yeah, we inferred that he robbed the bank. Could we be wrong? Yes, Dostoevsky often plays off that. But there's nothing else. Basically, there's nothing else. And then you could, in certain cases, you could say this is sort of. I mean, it's the same thing with experiment. There's somebody there drawing the inference that this is the kind of stable thing that we make an engine this way, and we can always use this method, and it's pretty reliable. And there's somebody there drawing the inference from what the details they see, saying this is what I think makes sense. So this use of facticity is already, it's kind of split. There's something, and then there's something that can be interpreted or clarified or inferences drawn from it. And there's two objects. I think so where does liberalism play within these two objects? I think because Locke has to do away with Aristotle, and he has to move on to the empirical plane because of Descartes. And also I suppose because of Descartes means at the same time something like that generalized science has taken over, that the absolute demand of the Western Dasein, Abendländisch Dasein, to do this kind of Wissenschaft, which looks for general laws, has taken over, and it wants to totally surround us in the matrix of the notion that we can map out the theory of what all knowledge about how things move, what it's like, and that we should absorb all our energy in that direction. So this is already, the Aristotelian attitude towards what it means to act freely as a moral agent, human action, is already scrubbed away here in favor of some kind of attempt to look at the world in terms of some type of causality as against correlation manner of thinking, where correlation means that you have somehow a false inference. So you always have this room for saying maybe this facticity and this facticity are just sort of correlated, but they're not really causal in the one sense. Causality has been dropped down to under liberalism, just as the idea of property has been collapsed into one simple form of property under liberalism, which is one of Locke's big things. In other societies you have a large combination similar to, it seems simple, but it's similar to the way exponentially the number of positions on a chessboard blows up when you're just making, 6, 7, 8 moves. It's already enormous numbers. In the same way, there's really a lot of ways you can distribute property rights, such as saying this man has the right to live on the property and he can do whatever he wants, but he can't sell it. So non-alienation of the property prior to the laissez-faire rules, right? So that's just one version, but there's all kinds of different versions, all kinds of different arrangements involving the prestige of the position you get by being the ward of some property which isn't your own and which doesn't belong to anyone else either, but is somehow part of a under the Fujiwaras, somehow part of the emperor's domain, where the emperor plays actually no real role in politics, but the Fujiwaras run everything. So there could be all kinds of weird property regimes that are formalized that just we don't recognize it under liberalism, because we flatten property only to one form plus the markets. Within the markets, they then sort of regain their essence as being, first as derivatives, but then as some kind of super complex games of, lending money on future expectations about about AI stock, which half looks to the very people that are investing in it like a Ponzi scheme, but which half also looks genuinely through the scholarship like it's going to be another industrial revolution, and this time one that has just as the first industrial revolution did, it will have a lot of direct, so to speak, political changes in the way life works. I mean, if it's allowed that these bots can control bank accounts, that's already a big deal, right? And if it's allowed that bots can control task human beings, and like say a bot is programmed, build some kind of submarine of some specific kind that can go much faster than any current submarine does, or some other task of a similar kind, and then they need to have guys that could theorize, and they need to have guys that can do the engineering both at the same time. And that, say you have a bot that can be tasked with that, and it can also go out and hire people, put help wanted signs according to what it thinks it's right, control the bank account, etc., etc. You see how that's a huge, the social world that implies is just at least as much alien to the medieval mentality as the 19th century factory life was to the medieval. As much as that's a change, ourselves to this new AI situation could very easily be that much different. We just don't believe it because we never lived through a type of change like that. It happens very infrequently. But where is liberalism in here in terms of, let's just try to put this in, this is what I'm trying to get the phenomenology of, in terms of this Ereignisspaltung, or this double vision of the Ukraine situation. So it depends a good deal how we regard causation here. So like, if we attribute to the Ukrainians, they themselves have, in an Aristotelian sense, had like a metanoia and changed into genuine Ukrainian patriots, which in my let's do it, just for the sake of it, let's say only in 91 did this genuine Ukrainian patriotism start to be seeded. The spores of it went in the education system. There's an article I have by Benjamin Kataruba, a Toronto scholar who's like an expatriate Ukrainian, is that there's been the 30 years of liberalized education that's been put in since 91. So that means we have a generation now, in fact, just at the time of the full-scale invasion, probably just at the time of the original war started in 2014, I think how old would they have been? These are people that would be young adults. The first time there would be a generation of young adults in the work world who were totally educated on a Western education, which has a certain lack of respect for low paid people. which then contrasts to all the sort of all the pride movements and things like that amongst workers, and before Reagan's time, the power of the unions. So we have a situation where we have to ask, how much do we want to see the causation from the point of view of an agent who has made a choice to be, now they're choosing to be a Ukrainian, and now this is the true Zelensky Ukraine as it's come along. And how much do we want to ask about, is it possible that through totally external, or what Kant calls heteronymous forces, some people in Ukraine were kind of stoked? So like there was like 30%. So like if you look at the 1991 May referendum, where the Ukrainians voted to stay in some future federation that would be reformed, there was still like 29% that voted against it, and most of them were around Kiev. Now, were that part treated as a piece of coal and stoked up to an orange fervor? So, I mean, if you look at sort of just like how Operation Timber Sycamore worked, for instance, as an analogy, it's just all about pumping money in, and if there's some people that are already fired up on something, in the case of Timber Sycamore, there were some people that were rebelling against al-Assad in Syria, but they're treated as a piece of coal and then heated up with the money, with help and training, with local contacts, with satellite information, with kill lists, with all kinds of shit. If you see the same thing in a transformed way happening with the Victoria Nuland and the Cookie and John McCain and all that stuff, but just times N, not just that one incident, but all kinds of things of that kind, and the phone calls and the helping make contacts, and Fukuyama over in Ukraine teaching them how to be good liberal Democrats in a seminar course, and et cetera, people getting more and more linked into the global elite, liquid elite, risk society, being more and more dependent on the Soros foundations and stuff, being more and more ready to sell off that. In fact, they were just selling off the assets, the public assets, in a big auction, when the war started in 2014, I believe. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe there was I think there was another one right on the eve of the full-scale invasion, the so-called, which used to be called the SVO, Special Military Operation. Maybe it's still called ZRZ. I think it's now more common just to call it the war. But in any case, the question is, how much can we regard those influences as against the claim to autonomy and the claim to genuinely from within one's spirit become Ukrainian? I mean, some of these are people that, because of their schooling, they're basically regard themselves as on the side of the UN and the West, and therefore Ukraine understood in the Western sense. So I think one of the things in liberalism is, Locke, he draws up this problem, I think. I suppose he makes us face up, maybe in a way he makes us face up to this problem of which form of analysis are we to treat more seriously for legal purposes. It's very difficult to forces visible somehow, if the essence of liberalism has something to do with this type of analysis of it's in a way it's realist and idealist political analysis, but it's difficult to get a grip on exactly, yeah, how do these two forms of analysis link to our legal reasoning and link therefore to um, yeah, making very strong forensic arguments to infer from the facticity what is really happening.